Welcome to Macro Pros, Macro Pro and Friends, our webinar series. I'm so glad that you can join us today. This is a reschedule from an earlier program, and we're delighted to be able to provide to you this education and this class again on early intervention for medical. Today, I am joined by Leah Foster. Hi, Leah. How are you?
Good morning. Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So this is our summer school series. We're right at the end of summer. I know that you have children. How many children do you have?
4 kids,
Four
19,
kids.
17, 15, and 5.
Wow. So our audience, can you tell us in the chat box how many children you have? So it's kind of fun for us to see that. And then Leah, with that many kids, I imagine that you've done something for the summer break. What have you been doing with your children?
We've done some trips. We went to Disneyland just recently, and we went to Tahoe for a week. Hit up Boise, saw some family. So it's been a pretty long summer. Now it's time to get ready for school in a couple weeks.
Yeah. So we didn't get any responses on the number of kids. So what I want to do is just tell everybody where to put that in, because if you have questions later on for our nurse, I want to make sure that you know where it's at. So in your control console up at the very top, there should be like a little speaker bubble with a question mark in it. So please make sure that you address those questions, and maybe you can put in the number, just the number of kids that you have, so people can see how and where to do that. Okay, we're getting some highs here. That's awesome. Oh, 2 kids, 5 kids. Oh, look at that, 5 kids. Joy's got 3
Wow.
kids. 2 kids.
Someone beat
Jennifer
me.
Edwards too. We got people with children out there, and they're getting how to do that. So that is awesome. I love that. They have 1 doggy child. Yes, I understand that.
Oh,
That's
and I have some doggy childs too.
You do.
So,
I have one that's for my empty nest family. I have to have my Mr. Gizmo. So that's great.
yeah.
So Leah, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your company and what you guys do?
Okay. I'm Leah Foster. I've been with PBI for about 3 years. Been in the industry for a couple decades. Started as an adjuster, and now I'm on the medical management side. PBI is also known as Professional Dynamics Inc. They've been around for 45 years. The founder is Betty Anders. She is an RN. Now it is second generation, and her son owns the company, and his name is Cleo Anders. I'm sure a lot of you know him. He's been in the industry for a very long time as well. Our focus is medical management. We have field and telephonic nurses. We have utilization review, and our goal is to get people back to health and back to work.
Yes,
We
absolutely.
are. Oh, go ahead.
I said, that is like the most important thing we can do, is to try to make our injured workers as whole as possible. That is the goal.
Absolutely.
Speaking of
Yep.
nurses, do you have a new one coming on board?
We do. So we are throughout the state. We are in Nevada as well. And we just hired into Hawaii. So if you need any type of field out in those areas, or telephonic, we are covering those areas, which is great. We have bilingual as well. So if you need Spanish speaking throughout the whole entire state, we have field coverage, which is, we're very lucky, because that is a hard thing to do sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. It is sometimes hard. All right. Well, let's do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get on with it, and you can introduce your speaker. So today's program is worth 1 CEU credit. You must be logged on to the program. We do have a gentleman that just said that he can't hear anything. I will address that as soon as I'm finished with this housekeeping. You will be receiving your certificate within 1 hour. Sometimes it takes 2, depending on your firewalls at work. You do need to let me know if there's an issue with downloading it or anything else. I have 30 days that I can help you out, and after that I can't. So make sure you let me know immediately. There is a handout for today's program so that you can refer to it in the future. And if you have any questions in that box where you told us how many children you have, make sure that you ask your questions there. And then lastly, if you would like to see this program again, because it's going to be jam-packed with great information, you can go to the Macro Pro YouTube channel and watch it there. So Leah, I'm going to turn it over to you. And just a reminder, everybody, if you have any questions, feel free to put that into the question box and we'll ask them at the very end.
Okay, great. Thanks, Diane. All right, so our speaker today is Kristy Galvan. She has been with us for just about a year now, but in the industry for a very long time. We are very happy to have her. She is located in the Sacramento area, but does do a little traveling, and she does field and telephonic nursing. And I think I'll hand it over to her. I think I already did my piece on our company, so she can kind of introduce herself a little more and give more information. But thank you.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. It's an honor and a privilege to speak to you today. I am Kristy Galvan, and as Leah said, I've been in this industry for a very long time. I think she gave me a little bit more time with PDI than I've actually had so far. I did come from a larger company where I was for 12 years. And prior to that, just by way of introduction to myself, nursing is a second career for me. I got a degree in health science, worked in health education for a long time. I was part of American Red Cross's effort to educate the public about HIV/AIDS prevention back in the 90s. Took a break, raised my 4 children, and then went into nursing. And I've been a nurse for, next year will be 20 years. So I started in pediatrics. I have a background also in home health, and I also worked for a large health organization helping to stand up a private duty nursing part of that organization before I came over to doing nurse case management. I am a telephonic and field case manager, and I handle everything from very simple cases of knee and other orthopedic injuries to very catastrophic cases. And I kind of like to say that whereas I did not enjoy the very steep learning curve that being a nurse case manager in the workers' comp industry brings, I have grown to love it. And I really enjoy working with adjusters and employers to help to craft a very individualized care plan for the injured worker. The injured worker is my primary point of interest, and getting them back to their life, as well as, and part of that being back to work, is my primary objective in the work that I do as I see it. So we're going to talk about understanding early medical intervention and involving nurse case management as part of the effort to get people back to their life and to work. So I'd like to introduce a bit of a paradigm shift, moving from reactive claims handling. I can think of a lot of instances where, as a nurse case manager, I felt when I got a case that things were such a mess. Doctors weren't responding, weren't providing the medical reports, didn't have a clear treatment plan, and it created a lot of frustration. And when you're an adjuster and handle so many claims and you're taking those individual ones that are taking so much time, it becomes really difficult. And so it's really easy at that point to hand it over to a nurse case manager. However, what I'd like to introduce is a paradigm shift of moving from reactive claims handling to more proactive care coordination. And so what does that mean? It means engaging the services of a nurse case manager to work within the medical provider network and to get that person through their transitions of care to being back to healthy, whole, and returning to work. In that, the first 7 to 14 days has been identified as a very critical window that really determines the claim trajectory and the ultimate outcome for injured workers, especially as the more catastrophic the case, the more important that is. And I would even shorten that critical window to 3 to 5 days if someone is critically injured in the hospital and is going to need that that nurse case manager to help transition them from hospital to subacute care to home with home health to community. PDI's approach is to involve a nurse case manager that begins their services on day one and business day one, ensuring that there is immediate care coordination. As you can read there, early medical intervention represents a fundamental shift in how we approach workers' compensation claims. If we look at California's complex regulatory framework, having nurse case managers that understand that framework and can serve as navigators, the more successful the person is going to be in approaching and getting through that rehabilitation time. And it significantly impacts both the medical outcomes and claims costs. And that's really important. And as a nurse case manager, I can tell you that I am very, very aware of that. Next slide. Okay, the hidden costs of delayed intervention. There is a 7 times cost multiplier. High cost claims average over 100,000 in medical payments compared to typical claims. For shoulder and back claims, that risk factor goes up to 9 times. So the financial impact of delaying medical intervention is something that can't be overstated. It's something that we like to say that care delayed is more costly care. And I'm sure that many of you have seen that through your claims. And I hope that you're all drawing, as you're thinking about this presentation, you're drawing from your own experiences of having early nurse case management assistance to help coordinate and facilitate medical care early on. It's a cost that you bear up front, but it's cost savings that really comes around at the end. And we really look at cost savings. That's something that we like to document. So for example, if we can, as nurse case managers, avoid an attorney getting involved, that's key, because then you're avoiding all of those litigation costs. And I can tell you that I have come onto cases where someone has said, gosh, I was just about to get an attorney. I'm so frustrated. I'm so glad you're here because I can see that you're helping me get the care that I need. You've gotten me in with a specialist. You've helped to expedite physical therapy that just seemed to be dragging for me. I didn't know when I was going to start it, and now I'm starting it tomorrow. Things like that really demonstrate the ways that nurse case managers can avoid those delays. If we look at a business case for early intervention, PDI did a study where there was over time a 53% reduction in medical costs, 62% reduced lost time. So fewer days away from work when early intervention and our protocols are implemented. And then, as I talked about before, the litigation reduction, after a nurse case manager is involved, that goes down, and 81% of the costs that could be borne by a claim is avoided. In thinking about return to work strategies, one of the things that I like to do right up front with, and it's a coordination between me and the adjuster, is to find out if I have contact with the employer. If I have contact with the employer, or the adjuster can get a job description that has the physical function components of someone's job responsibilities, I can present that to the doctor right away so that there's early thought about how can this person return to work. So that might result in job modification, light duty transitional roles. Someone might work on a assembly line, and now they can't use their right arm, their dominant arm, and so now we have them answering the phone or coordinating supervisory types of responsibilities. The other strategy is a progressive return to work, so a phased workload increase based on medical recovery process. So someone is making gains in physical therapy with building strength and endurance. The workload can increase accordingly, according to their physical progression through their care. What's key in all of this is communication. So what does that look like? I'll bring up a field case example. If I go to a doctor's appointment with one of my injured workers, one of the things that I immediately do, even sometimes before I leave the doctor's office, is I jot off a quick note, ideally with the work status report, to the adjuster, to the employer if I have permission for contact with that employer, and say, here's the current work status. Is this something that the employer is going to be able to accommodate? And then continuously monitoring that over time. So in looking at a progressive return to work in practice in weeks 1 and 2, I described this a little bit before as the assessment, the initial functional capacity evaluation. So if I take that job description and look at the physical requirements, I can compare that with ideally something, a question that I asked the doctor: what is the physical capability of this injured worker? And is there any sort of match where we can say, well, they might not be able to do all of these job functions, but they can do these other things? Do we need to think about a graduated return to work where they're doing their same job, but in a increasingly higher workload over time? Or do we need to place them in a transitional position? Weeks 3 and 4 can look like, for example, putting someone who normally works an 8-hour day, they might begin with a 4-hour day and a modified role, and then monitoring their tolerance and progress. And then weeks 5 and 6, and I don't know, I'm trying to think of a type of injury. It might be like a back injury or a shoulder strain injury, gradually increasing to 6 to 8 hours, and then eventually, of course, to full duty. So the adjuster's critical role, as I see it, is immediate assessment, and that includes triage within 24 hours of a reported work injury, return to work planning. This is in collaboration with the employers, and I really strongly encourage adjusters to, when they get a new client on board, a new company that comes on, and there's multiple jobs that people at that company fulfill, to get job descriptions and to look at those, or have somebody look at them to identify what are the physical requirements of that job. The provider coordination role, I talked about that a little bit before, is helping to facilitate communication between medical providers within the MPN system, and then documenting compliant records throughout the claim life cycle. So pitfalls would include delayed response, a reactive instead of a proactive approach, poor communication, and inadequate documentation. I think that that documentation role is something very much that nurse case managers can bring it with, especially when we follow up after appointments or attend appointments. We're there to hear firsthand, I like to, with my telephonic cases, even, I always ask, is there a way that I can, if there's permission for contact, if the case is not litigated, where the attorney's not preventing the nurse case manager from having communication with the injured worker, I like to ask if I can participate telephonically in their appointment with the doctor, or at the very least follow up with the doctor afterwards, and then providing that communication through my documentation back to the adjuster. So this implementation framework involves, at the bottom there, comprehensive care. So looking at the injured worker, and I'd like to bring up that the injured worker might have physical injuries that are also accompanied by cognitive or mental health or psychiatric injury. It has been found that the longer that someone remains out of work, the more likely it is that they will develop depression, anxiety. And so if there needs to be a look at that, that component of someone's total care, it should be something that's done early. If someone needs cognitive behavioral therapy, that should be assessed for. And when somebody is the physical health care that they need, psychological component, and that's happening early, and for as much as they need, they're going to have a much better outcome. So stakeholder coordination, who are the stakeholders? The employer, the adjuster, the care provider, and of course the injured worker. And then looking at all of that, how are we setting goals? Are we setting goals according to a set return to work plan? When that gets introduced early on, especially to the injured worker, to say, what are your goals for returning to your life, returning to work? And we keep that in front of them, then the individualized plans that get developed can be centered around that. And then, of course, continuously evaluating that. So this we look at as the foundation for successful early intervention planning. There was a case study done on a company or an employer. It was a Northern California municipal employer, and they this was for the Department of Public Safety, where there was very high-risk occupations. Immediate response, going back to that idea of triaging the case as soon as possible. There was a toll-free injury reporting line with a dedicated nurse case manager that could look at things from a medical perspective and pass that information on to the claims adjuster. Another key component was same-day authorization. It's really beneficial if there are certain things that you as an adjuster allow for the nurse case manager to authorize on your behalf, for there to be communication about that up front. That way you don't have the nurse case manager coming back to you and back to you about, hey, is this authorized? Is this authorized? I need a letter of authorization for this doctor to provide care. If we can provide that authorization in the claim for certain simple things early on, that's a reduction in that delay of care. And then the last component of that is transitional employment, looking at the coordinated accommodation for modified duty assignments. And again, looking at that, those numbers are the same, 53% reduction in overall medical costs, 62% reduction in lost time at work, and 81% fewer lawsuits. So in this case study, the challenge was controlling workers' compensation costs, which was a big challenge for this employer with regard to both medical expenses and lost time at work. So a nurse case manager working with the that municipal Department of Public Works part of the organization looked at the compensation program, and many of the costs were prevented through early medical intervention and improved coordination of care. And in partnership with city leadership, a program was implemented to provide immediate nurse involvement at the first report of injury. And the purpose of the report was to describe the structure of this program and evaluate its impact on medical outcomes, return to work timelines, and overall claim performance. Prior to implementing the nurse case manager program for this particular entity, the city experienced a really high number of lost work days related to occupational injuries. In the year preceding, they had almost 4,200 lost work days, with 3,600 occurring within just the Department of Public Safety. Extended work absences were not related just to the injury severity, but also included things like delayed reporting, delays in accessing the right medical care, lack of timely work restriction documentation. That one I wanted to highlight because when I see a doctor write a note that says, for weeks on weeks, lift, carry, push, pull limit of 3 pounds with right arm, and that person's participating in physical therapy, and I can see gains being made by looking at the physical therapy notes, I'm going to come back to that doctor and say, is there a way to test this? Should we be increasing it? Should we be working with physical therapy to identify what the new restriction should be, rather than just, I think some doctors get in the habit of, it's kind of a cut. I've seen work status notes written prior to someone being assessed in a doctor's exam room. And I always question that one. I always think, well, not until you do a physical exam of this person do we really know what their restriction should be. Not until we have a conversation with them to say, how are you feeling? Should we increase this? Do you want to try it? We can readdress it. If it's not working, we'll assess it as we go along. And so the nurse case manager is a key person in identifying that and then addressing it. We can look at barriers to transitional duty placement and inconsistent injured worker follow through with treatment plans. That one also is key. I always stay in touch with my injured workers, at least on a bi-weekly basis, if not weekly, and sometimes a lot more regularly than that, to say, hey, how, now that you've transitioned from physical therapy, you were given some home exercises to do. How are you doing with that? I have one injured worker right now that has a injured knee. He's waiting to have surgery, but not until he loses a certain amount of weight will the surgeon perform surgery on him. And so I have a check-in with him to say, it's beautiful weather out there. Have you been able to get out and walk? He had talked about doing how's that water aerobics program going? And so that regular touch base with the injured worker really, I think, goes a long way in helping to encourage them to participate actively in their own treatment plan. So from a nursing perspective, early case management shaped the trajectory of each claim by addressing both the medical and the psychosocial barriers to recovery. When I introduce myself to an injured worker, I like to say I'm here as a coordinator, a facilitator of medical care, and an educator, an advocate. And that bundle of services that you're getting from me really represents concierge type service. And I like to describe it as that because I have found that people who I can't tell you the number of times that someone has said to me, I don't know what I did without you, or where were you 6 months ago? And I thought, the earlier that we get involved, the better. I do like to bring up the when cases are litigated and we don't have contact because there's an attorney that is preventing us from having contact with the claimant, the follow through with the doctor to the care providers that are involved to say, how is this person doing along the way is really key. Sending reminder letters to the attorney's office to say, your client has an appointment next Tuesday, just a reminder that they need to be there, getting the work status right after the appointment so that it can be provided to the employer and the adjuster. So that's how I handle litigated cases when there's no contact with the claimant. If it's a field case, then I actually go and I do in-person meetings with the doctor. And I think that provides a little bit more presence, if you will, that there is somebody that is interested. I'm showing up, I'm there, I'm wanting to talk to that doctor. I want to know what is the plan. If this doesn't get approved, that PRP injection that you're asking for, if it doesn't get authorized, what's the next plan? At what point do you think, and I do have regular touch-ins with the doctors to say, and I do this in writing and I do this in meetings, how are we progressing towards MMI? How many more weeks until you think that this person is going to be permanent and stationary for their injury? So those strong professional relationships in the case example that I just presented were key in getting those early, getting those developed in a very trusting relationship, whether it be with the provider or with the injured worker. Even with the attorney, I've had very good working relationships with attorneys that are very interested in helping their clients get back to their life and their work. And of course, we all know that attorneys aren't doing this for free. So me helping them is going to help them when it comes time for settlement. So they're interested in working with me because they would otherwise have to do some of the legwork that nurse case managers do, such as setting up transportation, setting up an interpreter, and so forth. So we can take that burden off of not just the adjuster, but attorneys when someone's represented. So early intervention in our case study allowed for rapid identification of complications or delayed recovery and enabled timely escalation of care when needed. So the impact of early case management in this particular case demonstrated that it plays a really critical role in improving outcomes for the injured workers and employers and adjusters alike. Timely medical coordination, injured worker education, and provider collaboration directly contributed to reduced medical costs, fewer lost workdays, and improved employee satisfaction. So there are a number of benefits of dedicated nurse case managers. So care without delay, consistent advocacy, and early intervention are some examples along those lines. This is a slide that demonstrates the evidence of supporting early physical therapy. So early physical therapy intervention directly correlates with claim outcomes that can be initiated promptly. So especially post-operatively, I really strongly, a lot of doctors will say, well, we'll address physical therapy at the first post-op. I'm like, let's put an RFA together, or let's put together a treatment plan that includes post-op physical therapy, NEDME, everything that's related to pre, during surgery, and post-surgery recovery, so that we have that all set up. I've made the contact with the physical therapist to make sure that that person can get in. I just had a gentleman, he had knee surgery, and we went to a pre-op appointment 1 week before it might have been days before his surgery, and the closest physical therapist to him couldn't get him in until a month after he had his surgery. The doctor wanted him to start physical therapy 2 weeks after, and I thought, darn it, if I had, if I had gotten involved earlier, which I didn't get involved until right at surgery time earlier, I would have been asking for that physical therapy request and order so that that could be put in place and we're all set to go at the time when it's identified before surgery that they should start physical therapy after surgery. So return on investment, annual savings. Employers implementing an early nurse case manager involvement saved between 25 and 35% on an annual basis on lost work days. So one company reduced workers' compensation costs. This is pretty significant, from 1.85 million to 365,000 through comprehensive early intervention and return to work programs. So key takeaways, and then Leah and I are going to do a little Q&A here after this and allow you to ask questions. The critical windows matter. So the more severe the injury, the earlier that you want to get a nurse case manager involved. Having progressive return to work strategies in place with employers before injuries occur really reduce lost work days. So again, when a client comes on board, start talking about the positions, especially the high risk or high exposure positions to injury, having return to work plans really before that happens allows us to work with that and present it to the doctor, present it to the injured worker so that we're all in lockstep together to say, this is our graduated return to work plan. Early intervention delivers measurable results, 53% cost reduction and improved medical outcomes, litigation prevention, as I've mentioned. So again, implement reporting, toll-free injury reporting with triage nurses, assign nurse case managers to begin intervention. All of the nurse case managers that I work with, we have a 1 business day rule that if we're not contacting that person within 24 hours, we're contacting one of our colleagues so that they can make that contact so that we can start the ball rolling right away. Authorized treatment, same-day treatment authorization if possible. And then establish transitional employment options and graduated return to work options within the California guidelines. So this is us. This is some of the resources and references that you can look at in terms of where we got our information from. So with that, Leah and I are going to do a little Q&A here.
I guess I don't have to be in camera so much, but can everyone hear me? I hope yes. Being background in adjusting, I do have a couple files that I'll probably never forget. They stuck with me. So being on the medical management side, on the nurse side, are there any files that you will never forget your impact made a huge difference, whether the guy or girl was back to work or just helping and healing overall in a good manner?
So there was, and I'm not remembering that one specifically. You have one that I must have told you about at one point in time. That
well, your PG&E story I do remember.
I had a couple of PG&E cases. I'll maybe this is the one that you were thinking of. So I had a PG&E. He was a line worker and he was working on a gas line with his supervisor, and in order to clean these lines, they shoot through the line. I don't even know what it's called. They called it a pig. I don't know why, but the, the they were communicating, and they were must have been, quarter, half mile distance between where they were shooting the pig from and where it was coming out on the other end. They were communicating on radio. Well, there was a miscommunication. And so this thing came shooting through with such incredible force. The supervisor was looking into the pipe, and all of a sudden it came through, and he didn't make it. There was a very catastrophic injury that occurred to him. But the person that I helped out, he had physical injury from it because the blast coming through at the other side, he had neck and shoulder injury. The other thing that was really key was he witnessed his boss die. So the mental component of that, and PG&E had a really, so he was hospitalized initially. And what I was really impressed by was the number of people from PG&E that showed up to support him. Day after day, when he was in the hospital for about a week, they had a different crew of people that came over. And he just expressed such gratitude for his company showing up. And these are people coming on their day off and after work. And it really made a difference in his recovery. So I saw initially that work family support.
And field nurses and telephone nurses do have a hand in that as well.
Absolutely.
Bridging that gap of communication. And when you are an injured person, it is scary. Yeah. Especially when there's an accident involved.
Absolutely.
So having that person that's supposed to be calm and educating, and you have the medical background, is huge. Any stories where there's an unexpected outcome? The nurse being on a file, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is interesting.
Well, yeah, we had a situation not too long ago with a nurse who was called to a case and started to read the medical reports, and everything related to the injury had to do with things that didn't happen as a result of the industrial incident. It happened before he got industrially injured. And so she was able to bring that information to the adjuster and say, this claim needs to be examined because I believe he's here being treated for something that has nothing to do with what happened on the job. And lo and behold, she was right. And so she saved a tremendous amount of money on that claim.
Come to find out, the reason why it was put under work comp was that he had denied medical insurance on his own behalf.
Right.
Long story short, the mental piece of claims is huge. I can speak from my own. I had a planned surgery that happened in May on my foot, and I have to say, my whole family was affected. I was affected by it. It's really important for the injured person, whether it's work related or not, to keep a mental strength about you, to make sure that you are getting up and keeping a schedule, even if you are injured. And I do feel as if injured workers, when there is an accident, you are pushed into this. Your family's pushed into this. And sometimes there is no family. So you are alone dealing with an injury.
Yeah.
And when you're on an island, you feel scared about your employment. Having a field or telephone nurse to kind of walk you through it and quote unquote hold your hand can really be beneficial and healing in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really key, is that we have to remember that people are whole individuals, and there's a physical component, but then there's also something that when your life is turned upside down and all of a sudden you're on temporary total disability benefits and you're earning less, you have the pressure of rehabilitating, and a lot of that might be driven by the need to get back to work so that you can, provide for your family. And so really those lines. I had somebody years ago who one day he showed up with his entire family in the car, and I thought, oh, they must be going somewhere. Well, I knew that he had a vacation home that he had to sell. He had a boat, and I had him for a couple of years that he had to sell. They were renting a house, and when they all showed up, I mean, there's a lot you could imagine to this story that happened over time. But when I saw them all in the car, I said, "Oh, you guys having a family outing after this?" He said, "No, this is where we're living now," because they had his ability to work and his resources had dried up. And it was really impressed upon me that he needed to participate wholly in his physical rehabilitation so that he could get out of the situation. And he did. Eventually things got better. His wife, who ironically was treating for a workers' comp injury at the same time, she was able to go back to work. But I thought that's really, when an injury takes you that far that you are living in your car with your family,
Yeah.
that's just more impetus for
Sure.
us to all do a good job to get that person back to whole.
The goal of a field or telephonic nurse is to help with treatment and efficiency of expediting things. I mean, when there are delays, that delays everything. The medical, going back to work, the mental.
Absolutely.
It really does affect the timeline.
It does.
So,
yeah.
Are there any questions, Diane? We can't see if there's questions in the chat. If there are any questions, would you let us know?
Ladies, there are no questions at this time for you. We
Okay.
do have, I think we need to still provide about 3-4 minutes of information so that everybody will get their
Absolutely.
CEU credit.
Yeah.
But I think it's really, the stories that you guys are sharing are really important. I do have a story to share as well. This was a case where an injured worker, he had a brain injury, and he just became a completely different person. And he could no longer be in his home because he was violent and he couldn't react to people properly. I mean, his personality changed completely. He had been in a care facility for a long time, and they ended up meeting a nurse case management company and in rehab. And they said, well, what if we brought him to you? This is the new TPA that was opening up. It was a new TPA, so they were looking at every single file really closely and thought, man, this poor guy's been there for a long time. So this adjuster that was at a MacroPro and Friends conference reached out to the speaker and said, can we do something for this, this injured worker? And it was amazing because he was able to go home for visitations with his family. He wasn't able to go home immediately, but I think within 3 years he was able to go home, but he had otherwise would have been languishing, in a care facility. So I think it's so important that people listen to these types of webinars and the great information that Kristy, you're providing, and Leah sharing with your experience. It's one of those things as claims people, it's truly invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, I really do. It's easy to be behind the desk adjusting and forget the human piece of it. I've been there. I was an adjuster, and you do. I hate to use the word jaded, but you can become jaded being in the industry and seeing a lot of type of fraudulent stuff. But there is the human piece,
Right.
and now I will say from my own story, I had a planned surgery, but my recovery is taking a lot longer than I thought it would be, and that's been difficult. It's been difficult on myself and my family, and thankful I have a job that is able to accommodate and I can work around things, but it doesn't always work that way. And so I didn't need case management. Thankfully, I have resources with nurses that can help. But a case manager really fills in when there is a when you feel like you're on an island. Is there any other stories that you could?
Well, I wanted to bring up a point because I feel like I missed something earlier, and that you reminded me of it when you talked about, becoming jaded. And you know what? I get it. Because I've had cases where I have, let's talk about malingering.
Mhm.
Now, I will say in my 13 experience that probably between 2 and 5% of the cases that I've handled would represent people who malingered.
Mhm.
The
Correct.
vast majority of them just want to get through their treatment plan. They want
Yeah,
to
that's a
get
very, very
past.
low number.
That's just what I've experienced, and I meet, face to face. And when I see it, um, I will call it out. Now I don't, it's a little tricky with the injured worker. Um, but for example, I saw a woman carrying her 2-year-old on her back into the doctor's office. She, piggyback right into the doctor's office. She brought her kids with her. And, this kid, I was a pediatric nurse, so I am pretty good at judge of
Age.
and weight.
Oh.
I thought, this kid's probably like 35 to 40 pounds. He's a big kid. And she got into the doctor's office, and I said, he was doing a physical assessment, and she was like, "Oh, I can't bend over, and I can't." And I said, "Isn't it great though that you could carry your little guy into the doctor's office riding piggyback? Isn't that great, doctor?" So, or I'll have a private conversation with the doctor if doctors are good at picking up this kind of stuff. But when I see that, I'll ask for, let's do a functional capacity evaluation. Let's do a true evaluation of where they're at. I will discuss it with the adjuster, let the adjuster do what they do. For example, surveillance. I can't look at surveillance, but you guys want to do it, that's fine. I can't even handle it. So
Okay.
I couldn't present it to you. Can send it to the doctor, but I can't even discuss it. Anyways, I do want there to be equal importance placed on when we see things that are not quite right with an injured worker that we think are taking advantage of the system, that we do. I call it out. I believe that my colleagues would do the same. So.
I do think that a nurse, a field nurse or a telephone nurse, but a field nurse is the first line of defense sometimes.
Yeah.
We're there
different ways.
We're there to be the medical advocate and to help with the process and be efficient, but we're also boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And can see those things.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to have someone walk into an office perfectly fine and then have a limp the second they get into the office.
Right.
We again can close those gaps of communication.
And even with my telephonic cases, I have one right now that the gentleman had a hip replacement back in February, and he's still not back to work. And so I asked the adjuster about attending one appointment just to have that eyeballs on boots on the ground experience with the injured worker, with the doctor, to say, what are we looking at in terms of when he'll be released to return to work, even, modified duty. What is the
And surprisingly, hip injuries
are quick to recover.
They are quick to recover.
Faster than knees. And
the older guy that got hit by the bison, he was walking 3 days later.
Yeah.
Did you hear
the guy that flipped?
Yeah, that flipped 10 times.
Grandpa that got flipped.
That's when you are stepping in and saying, this is not right.
Right. Yeah.
So I do believe in this system. I mean, I've been in the industry for a long time, like I said, and I know you have as well. There's a time and a place for a field and telephonic nurse, and so please reach out.
Yeah, and even if you ask for a telephonic nurse and you want there to be, don't feel like you can't ask us to attend an appointment here and there. As long as we have your authorization to do that, we can.
Yeah.
So, any questions in the chat, Diane?
No questions, but those are some excellent stories, and also excellent ideas about utilizing you even in telephonic meetings, which, there's so many of those going around these days. It's so hard to see a doctor in person. I'm so glad to see that state of California is doing some testing for QMEs, because we really need to have more of them in the industry. So fingers crossed we get a big crop of new doctors that pass the test. All right, well, with that, we're going to go ahead and close this out. I want to thank you, Leah and Kristy, for your great presentation today.
Thank you.
It was lovely to see you, ladies. And again, everybody, just as a reminder, you can see this again on the Macro Pro YouTube channel. Until the next time, I will see you then. Bye-bye now.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.